Chapter 2. This is where the story gets better since I've become more used to the ideas that I'm attempting to execute. So here's what happens. Part 1. We pick up with Gnar and Haley hanging out. They talk and Haley's super aggressive to Gnar with telling her she's interested. And when they go to flick a lay, she says Gnar's her boyfriend and he leans into it. Gnar, holy shit, what am I doing? They go back to his place and Haley's still aggressive, so Gnar decides to kiss her and say, I do want to date you, since she asked. She sleeps over at Gnar's, separate beds of course, but he's internally panicking about how screwed he is. Though Haley interrupts and makes sure she's not weirding him out, and she asks if he felt forced to kiss her. Haley, cause when you kiss me, like you acted unlike you, but Gnar tells her she's overthinking things and not to worry. The next day it's 4 p.m. and he feels as if he sort of lied to her, and then he thinks about Arthur because he technically ghosted him now for 4 days. Arthur begs Gnar to meet up and for forgiveness, and when they do, he offers a genuine good apology. Arthur, I swear that I won't do it again. When you need boundaries, I'll respect them. Gnar instantly forgives him, and while he doesn't say love you since it's early, he makes moves on him since he's thinking about what he said he'd do for Arthur earlier. Once they get back, Radke interrupts and makes fun of Arthur, and Arthur when they're outside tells Gnar that because of that, he's not up for it anymore. Gnar's shocked and Arthur asks if he wants to be taken home, but instead Gnar wants to talk and he wants to bring up Monday, though internally he thinks that he'd yell at him if he did. Arthur interrupts his thought process and Gnar awkwardly tells him how he feels and that he's not really ready for what Arthur wants, and he comforts him and affirms that he won't break his boundaries while telling him not to worry about the age gap if that's the issue. Afterwards, they decide to hang out. Arthur's really flirty and they're both enjoying themselves, but Gnar asks about advice on how to deal with girls. Arthur gives him some, but when Gnar says, I kinda let her on I guess, it makes Arthur worry because to him it sounds like this recently happened. Gnar tries to lie and say that it was a month ago, but Arthur says it's okay if he cheated and that he'd forgive him anyway. Though, to comfort him, when he put his hand on his face, it reminded Gnar of what happened a few days ago and he says, don't touch me there Arthur, reacting sharply. Despite everything, Gnar had a good time, even if he was a bit uncomfortable because of what Arthur did to him in the past. He thinks he should have gotten over it, but he hasn't, and since Arthur asks to meet his friends, Gnar agrees to it. Part 2. Gnar wakes up on Friday, drinks some coffee, and his dad comes in who jokes about hoping his son's not gay anymore, referencing the first page of the comic. Gnar lies and says that he's not, and his dad tells him that Arthur's banned from the house. Your mom told me he was yelling, profane shit and stuff. Shortly after he goes to work, Gnar's driving himself and Arthur's to school, which is when she asks if he broke it off with Arthur. Gnar, I mean, relationships like mine with big age gaps have worked for a long time. I can almost die in war legally and drive now, but I can't be with him. Arthur can't believe he's justifying an 8-year age gap, and even though it feels wrong, she thinks that his reasoning kind of makes sense, so she can't counter it. Instead, she asks him why he'd start all of this, and Gnar just can't answer. They get to school and Haley comes by to ask if they can hang out. Then he says no and thinks, I hate the idea of dating two people, but maybe it won't be so bad if Arthur knows but Haley doesn't. But these thoughts are interrupted when he accidentally bumps into part of the wall. We skip to lunch and Gnar asks Jace about Arthur, and she basically says she hates him, and Jace asks the same to Gnar, and he says he's been pretty good to him recently. But she tells him why she thinks he's creepy. Jace, when he was your age, you're like 9 or something. Doesn't that feel at least a bit weird? Gnar agrees, but doesn't give it much thought. Once they get home, he wonders why Arthur wanted to meet his friends, since originally he said he didn't want anyone to know about their relationship. Gnar drives to Arthur's and Radke lets him in, and asks what's so likable about Arthur. Gnar can't answer, and Radke says they never know, which bothers Gnar for the rest of the story. Arthur comes down, but Gnar's not feeling it, so Arthur asks about what's bothering him, and he says that they'll talk about it later. They get to the park and Jace immediately recognizes Arthur, though Magnum thinks he's cool. Jace, after pulling Gnar aside, says, why would you invite this weird fuck? Arthur tries to be nice, but she's hostile to him twice, and he decides to threaten her into acting friendly for Gnar's sake. She's scared by him, so she agrees, and they go to a restaurant called Quick's. Once they get there, Gnar feels like something's off after Jace and Arthur switch spots, since during that, Arthur was correcting Jace's behavior and saying have some enthusiasm. So when their food arrives and they go eat outside, Gnar questions him and asks if he said something to Jace. He says he didn't and asks if this is about something else, and Gnar says it is. Arthur says Radke's lying, but he says that this is insane to consider and asks if he's hiding anything, and Arthur says, you know how much I love and trust you, don't you feel the same? This shuts the conversation down completely, and when Gnar drives Arthur home, he feels sour about it. He tells her sorry for bringing her around Arthur without telling her and thinks about asking if he said anything, for simply not doing so. In the bath at home, he thinks about how annoying it is that Arthur always hides behind love. Gnar, I always say I do, but does that mean we can't have a serious conversation about trust? He gets out, lays in his bed, and decides that he wants to talk to Haley instead. Fucking rhymes, bro. I'm like a rapper. Part 2.5. We go back in time 7 years to when Arthur's 18. He wakes his mom up, who's in the same bed as him, and she wants to play, but Arthur's tired and would rather not. She pushes him to wear something, and he calls her mom like any normal person would, but she corrects him by saying mommy, as in she wants him to call her mommy, and creeps him out by saying stuff like, you're already cute, Arthur, if you were. So to stop this, he does what she says and puts the shirt on. She says he looks like his dad, which he's neutral to, and she makes him pancakes like how his dad wanted. Arthur's mom, well, I made you some pancakes like how, Arthur, I'm not dad, we don't even know where. Arthur's mom, don't start that, don't. Arthur, okay, sorry. They sit down and eat, and she tells him about his dad since he asked about how long the two were together for. Arthur's mom, around 3 to 4 years, then he started college when you were born and left. Arthur, college? We cut to Radke driving Arthur to school, and we learn that Arthur's dating a 15-year-old and that they're best friends. Arthur says he's gonna find his boyfriend so they can chill out, but his boyfriend, who's actually 14, just got there and he wonders about where Arthur is, before Radke basically tells him that Arthur doesn't really like him. He asks why he even likes Arthur and he has no clue, and he leaves while crying since Radke was being so mean. By the end of the day, Arthur goes to Radke's house and they watch a Drake music video. Radke, Drake can't do any wrong though. Great song. In the story, this was 2016, and I wrote this in like 2024, 2023, I wrote this in 2023, so this aged quite weirdly. And it's fitting that they were watching Drake because Arthur accidentally falls on Radke's lap. Radke tells him to get off, but Arthur doesn't. Arthur, it's hard to say, and you're straight, but I think I love you, Radke, what? It ends right here. Part 3. There's a 2-week time skip, and Gnar and Haley decide to hang out. They're closer, and Haley's more reserved, but still aggressive, so when they go in his house, she tries to make a move on him. He deflects by requesting to play some games, so she awkwardly says, no, let's play with each other, which catches him off guard. She's annoyed because they haven't done anything yet in the month they've been a thing, and Gnar tries to joke it off, but she's serious, and Gnar tries to shrug it off again. Gnar, let's do it after we game though. Haley, oh come on, you always say that. Earlier, Haley heard from Gnar's dad that he had a gay friend, so she asks, your dad told me about a gay guy you knew. Why didn't you tell me about him? And Gnar says that he's not important. Gnar, what are you insinuating? Haley, just, I don't know. Before Haley leaves, she tells him she feels like he doesn't actually treat her like a girlfriend and that she wants more affection. And Gnar says, okay, though Haley wanted a kiss on the way out, which she demands. He gives her a peck, but she grabs him and pulls him in for a kiss, reminding him of Arthur and causing him to freak out. Haley, Gnar, what the fuck was that? And Gnar shuts the door on her, not explaining why he reacted so sharply. He lays in his bed and feels like things are getting worse. Not understanding why he hasn't gotten over it, he says, what I don't understand is that when I'm with him or talking to him, these thoughts are suppressed. I don't get it. He hurt me and invaded my boundaries, but I want him still, I think. And cheating on Haley doesn't feel good, but I like Arthur more. I mean, that should sound okay. One hot guy and one romantically interesting person all to me, but no, it's wrong. I hate lying to Haley, but I don't want to lose Arthur. I don't know what to do, really. Saturday comes and he goes out with Arthur wearing a jacket he bought for him for his future 18th birthday, which will be in a few days. Arthur tells him that when he's of age, that he should move in with him, and Gnar's not sure about that, but the conversation's interrupted when Haley calls Gnar about last night. He tries to joke, but Haley's dead serious and says that she'll be over at 3 to talk about it more per Gnar's request. She says love you to him, and Gnar says it back with ease. Arthur, wow, you two are saying love you now? Gnar, that was the first time. Arthur, well, just don't forget that she's not as dependable as me. Gnar, yeah. Arthur, no, seriously. You'll probably never see her again after high school. I'll always be right here. As they both hang out, Arthur tells him that the idea of them role-playing as brothers is hot to him, which creeps Gnar out. Once he gets back home, he's pissed off because Arthur's always a weirdo. Why do I bother with him? He's a fucking freak. I tolerate him. Haley's an angel. She comes over and Gnar tells her that he doesn't like being touched on the face, and they go into the house's movie room. Gnar goes to make them some popcorn, and she looks at the phone he left in the cup holder of one of the seats and gets to thinking. He never kisses me, never makes sexual advances, never flirts, and barely compliments me. and he tries to refuse all of my advances, and he apparently has some gay acquaintance he's never told me about, so she checks his phone out of paranoia. Better subtlety plus everything is important. Outside of some specific lines of dialogue, it's clear that by the middle of the story, I'm getting better at tackling the tone. And I think that some moments are way more powerful than a lot of things quality-wise in chapter 1. A big thing is when Haley's asking if Gnar felt forced to kiss her, which is a parallel to the actual forced kiss he had to go through from Arthur. And the entire date with him and Arthur at the end of part 1 is great. I think that's because I really internalized the writing idea of make sure everything is important. Nothing that happens is mechanically pointless, as it has some purpose in deepening the characters, giving us new info, establishing certain facts, or furthering the plot. Chapter 1 does this well, like with the flick-a-lay scene, though it's a bit long, or repetitive ones like Arthur coming into Gnar's room and creeping him out. But thankfully 2 never has this kind of issue, and in fact it establishes that Arthur can be normal if he really forces himself to be, despite him obviously being the exact same weirdo that he always is. And we get a lot of really fun interactions between Gnar and Haley, which characterizes her more, and other moments where we see his internal conflict on how he feels about cheating on her, and how he feels about Arthur. It's all important so that we feel conflicted about Gnar. He's being taken advantage of, so you'd want to feel bad for him, but he's also hurting someone, so it makes it hard to truly root for him. And thanks to the fun moments, we actually grow to care about this person who he's hurting. Character utilization. While it's not perfect, I use characters way better than I did last chapter. I'll analyze everyone at the end, since by then, you'd have the full context of everything that happens, but currently I want to highlight 2 main moments that are really good. Near the end of chapter 2, Arthur and Gnar hang out and it seems normal, with Arthur appreciating hanging out with Gnar and him restraining himself on a surface level. But when you look at it for a while, this interaction shows why these 2 can't ever work due to the age difference and of course other factors. Arthur actively infantilizes Gnar a lot, even though he claims to see him as an equal. He puts his hand on his head and calls him adorable and calls him his little man and constantly tries to talk like him to relate to him. And Gnar also does not see him as an equal because he asks him for advice since he's older and already went through high school. He sees him almost as an intelligent authority figure in this way due to his age, since before he's in his eyes giving good logical advice about things like the freaking age of consent. It's clear that they don't actually see each other as equals, and while Gnar doesn't notice this, Arthur definitely does, and a later line in chapter 3 where he actually refers to Haley as a little girl, even though she's 2 years older than Gnar. And unlike with Haley, Gnar is genuinely uncomfortable with Arthur. It took Haley bringing Gnar in and kissing him for him to remember the kiss, where here all it took was Arthur putting his hand on his cheek. And notice that it's always Arthur getting closer, touching him or pushing him to physically reciprocate like with holding hands. Finally, the part where Gnar attempts to lie to him and about Haley, and Arthur deciding to preemptively forgive him before he actually knows what Gnar did, is highly manipulative and establishes himself as extremely dependable to Gnar, which works on him since Gnar is totally used to Arthur saying stuff like, "You'll probably never see her after high school, I'll always be right here," after the 2-week time skip. It comes off as desperation initially, but it's really not that straightforward. The second example I think is great is when Haley tells Gnar that she wants more affection. It exemplifies the difference between her and Arthur, as Arthur is mysterious, hiding things under the guise of love, and constantly breaking boundaries, while Haley does the exact opposite. She cares a ton about Gnar's boundaries, doesn't keep any secrets from him, and truly from the heart tells her how she feels, even if it sounds mean sometimes. It's why she acted carefully when Gnar reacted in that way to her kiss and called him later, because she really doesn't want to break his boundaries and she wants to make this work. But unfortunately, Gnar doesn't appreciate any of this. Haley's so obviously the better choice, but instead he strings her along because he finds her cute, and we see that he's cold to how good she's trying to be during their interactions since he's flat-faced. He just says okay when she's prepared to leave, and he doesn't do what she wants. Haley, wait, I just said be more affectionate and you said okay, kiss me or something, because he simply doesn't realize what he has, and for other reasons that I'll get into later. I could go on for a while about why I think Haley, Gnar, and Arthur are surprisingly good characters, and I will at the end, but the fact of the matter is that to even appreciate any of this, you'd have to accept that this story lives and dies by subtlety, narrow audience plus rereads. Gnar wallshire, especially by this point on chapter 3, lives and dies by subtlety, and some things are so subtle that I think I needed to think for over an hour about specific instances or relook at them multiple times. Every single exceptional element of the story is subtle, so nothing's obviously good about it. If you don't have a keen eye or knowledge about manipulation tactics, then to you Arthur would just seem like some creepy guy due to the neutral framing, as opposed to a complicated monster that sometimes doesn't even know what he's doing. And the same is true for the characterization of Gnar and Haley, or some dichotomies I enact within the story. But it can also be good, since if you realize the kind of moves Arthur's pulling actively on Gnar, then your experience and understanding of how screwed Gnar almost was can let you appreciate what exactly I was going for. But for most people, especially due to the art, it'll just look like a simple gay toxic relationship drawn in a sketchbook by some 11th grader, because everything that works requires a ton of dot connecting, which just isn't everyone's thing. Plus, remember, these good elements are additives, which means that they hinge off of you actually enjoying the story in the first place. If you don't, you wouldn't dig this deep or care, because you just wouldn't like it and you'd have no reason to do so. And I think this is why I'd say that the audience for who can actually enjoy the story or fully get what I was trying to do is extremely narrow. I think I was actually too subtle, and the subject matter of a sexually confused teenager being groomed by an adult is so hyper specific and niche that even if I did make it a public comic, I don't think it would have been that successful. Calling a comic hyper niche sounds like an odd critique, so I want to bring up what inspired the comic the most when I created it so you can understand my point. Scott Pilgrim. With that, there's a ton to appreciate, since it's not just about their relationship or fighting. It's about him trying to be the best he can for his girlfriend, self-acceptance, and personal growth, his comedic and grounded moments with his girlfriend, and a lot more. There, if you're not a fan of the fights or some comedic moments, you can still really enjoy it for the romance or vice versa. But with Gnar Wallshire, this isn't the case. The only big characters are Gnar, Haley, and Arthur, with a minuscule supporting cast. There's no world building, and it's laser focused on its main plot. There's not even a single side plot, and it's a very short, maybe 4 to 6 hour read. It feels like a story that'd have more meat to it, but really it's just very solid bare bones. Due to its length and subtlety, I think that would also shrink the audience as the optimum way to understand it, which is with rereads. As I said, it took me a long time to realize what the hell I was even trying to do with a lot of what was going on in the story, because it's so complicated, but subtle in a way that just isn't easy to grasp. And the neutral framing doesn't help either. Nothing in the story makes it clear that something is happening or going on whenever a character says something. You just have to notice it yourself. I feel as if it's genuinely necessary to reread the story and think about it a lot, like 3 times, because of everything I do. Since each time I reread it, I noticed something totally new and different. I personally rarely even rewatch shows, let alone reread comics, so I can imagine a person reading this and not understanding things that are too subtle to get for average people, and then them not understanding it, what I was even trying to do or going for, because it requires a ton of engagement. As I said earlier, that can be good, but for the majority of people and due to its niche nature, there's no way this comic could have ever amassed any noticeable following, because it's practically for nobody except myself. On read 1, you'll be like, okay, that's messed up, and on read 3, you'll say, wow, that was more complicated than I realized. Most will never get to reread 2 or even finish the story due to chapter 1. And I also want to add that as the author, even though I forgot a majority of the decisions I made and why I made them in the comic, right now, I feel like I was only able to catch a lot of these subtle things because I wrote it. Because I can still kind of think of the mindset I was in while I was writing this and what I was trying to do. You, as the reader, maybe going back to check on this after maybe this video or something, are not going to have my mindset or notice the same things I'm going to notice because I actually made this work. Even though, again, 17-year-old me was thinking completely differently, and I genuinely just don't have access to that or the memory of what most of my decisions actually were, because I lost a lot of that over time. MISC plus hyperspecifics. Unlike the chapter 1 analysis, where I had a ton of general, detailed reasons as to what the flaws were with it, I've got more specific and MISC ones since my problems with chapter 2 are smaller and nitpicks. Logistically and convenience-wise, the story is confusing in some areas or unclear, but these are the kind of issues you'd have to intentionally point out after like 10 rereads. The biggest one is that at the end of the chapter, Gnar leaves his phone behind in the movie room and Haley checks it, and she's able to get into his phone. This is possible since Gnar could simply have told Haley his password or his phone was already on, but it's somewhat convenient. In part 1, Arthur and Gnar go to the park and he goes without a scooter. Then Arthur drives into his house, but I never made it clear that the park's a walking distance away from Gnar's house and that Arthur's way further. So when I read this, I didn't understand for a moment as to why Gnar didn't also just drive to Arthur's. There are a few more and ones I'm probably not noticing, but these are the most noticeable ones to me. I believe 2.5's characterization of Radke is underwhelming. It's cool to see that him and Arthur were cool and actually very close at some point, but I feel like I could have done more than him basically being the same guy. Despite Arthur dating a 14-year-old at 18, he's clearly a very different guy as he's way more shy and reserved. This isn't at all like the Arthur we know in the present times, since Arthur never has a shy moment, and in fact, he's basically the opposite. So that means that he's clearly developed or evolved since the time he was 18. Radke being the exact same guy is lame because of this, and I think I should have made him meaner to Arthur and overall far more reserved in present times for Gnar Wallshire's bonus chapters to show that he has matured. That would have made him in this past moment more interesting, but that's not what I did. I'm not going to give smaller characters like Magnum or Gnar's mama character analysis because they barely appear in the story, but I do think I underutilized Gnar's dad. I went back and looked at some old notes for what I wanted to do with the story, and this is what I said planning the story back when I was 17. Homophobia on a more grand scale isn't seen as a problem in reference to the place the story takes place. Therefore, slightly younger characters like Magnum, who's 15, will be casually homophobic, or other small characters too, because of where he grew up and the people around him. For most people, it won't be because they're specifically taught to be homophobes, or because it's sinful or for any other reason. It was a norm, and it's completely fine to joke about and see people as lower for it, to make fun of them or anything. Close end of quotations. I'm not 17 anymore. This kind of thought was going to go with Gnar's dad, but he ended up only having 2 scenes, and the entire story became so focused on the toxic relationship that I never really got to make this kind of distinction between it being normal to make fun of gays versus hating them within the story, because it was never really given a chance to be important. I could have made this a more important aspect if Gnar's parents or other characters like Magnum were more involved in the story, but it ends up being the reverse. Magnum's a side character with only like 2-3 scenes total, and Gnar's dad only appears twice. A mix on if this is truly bad or just alright, because the story ended up being solid by the end nonetheless, but it could have added more to the original characters of Magnum and Gnar's dad for extra strife in Gnar's life in his attempt to be with Arthur. Original intent. Original September 9th, 2023 notes. Thinking about it, Conflict 2. Gnar would see a girl named Narissa and start catching feelings. They start hanging out, and when Gnar starts noticing how questionably moral his relationship with Arthur is, he starts making moves on her despite the fact that he's already going out with Arthur. Now he's gonna have to manage time with both of them until they start getting suspicious and both realize that Gnar has been cheating. Because of all this hanging out with both Arthur and Narissa, he kinda gets more and more distant from his good friends and colder, while also growing distant from his parents and his school. It's crazy how many things changed from what I was originally planning to what actually happened. Gnar, while dating Narissa, who's actually named Haley, never questions the morals with Arthur, and only does so in chapter 3. And I never write him becoming more and more distant with his friends or family, since he's close with his friends throughout the story, and his family's barely even there in the first place. And Arthur never uses the isolationist manipulation tactic. Plus, Arthur ends up knowing that Gnar's dating Haley, and he just permits it. Chapter 2 was supposed to be different from Chapter 1 in focus. Instead of characterizing Arthur or focusing specifically and only on their relationship, he actually chills out and acts disturbingly in less obvious ways. I wanted to show that Gnar truly is a flawed kid by him cheating on his girlfriend with a guy and further showing his internal conflict with his sexuality, while also giving Haley and other characters like Jace some spotlight to shine. Overall feelings. I actually think chapter 2 is good as opposed to flawed or alright like chapter 1. I do think that this right here is where the subtlety can either make or break your experience while reading. And by now, if you don't find the dynamic I've created interesting, then nothing else from here will work out in your eyes. Chapter 3 is where the story is at its greatest in every single aspect, and to this day, I still think that it's some of my best writing due to its ending, even though I've got some more issues with it I can speak on. So here's what happens.